My name is Serena Valmont. I'm 33 years old, and I'm the creative director in New York. My father built this empire with his heart and artistic soul. Before he passed, wanting me to be free to create, he made a fateful decision. He trusted my cousin, Julian, to run the company. And now, to erase a massive gambling debt, Julian sold my entire 37-piece collection to our biggest rival. To cover his tracks, he staged a robbery, then ruthlessly fired me, publicly branding me as incompetent and reckless. He was the CEO, he controlled the narrative. And I, the one who poured my soul into every single piece, was made out to be the villain in his story, with no one on my side. Until my phone rang. It was Katerina Volkova, the biggest supermodel in the world. She had recorded the whole dirty deal. She did it to repay a debt of honor to my father, the only one who believed in her and gave her a chance when she was a nobody. The proof was in my hands, but I was terrified. He could ruin me in an instant. But my father's legacy and my own trampled honor wouldn't let me back down. He thought he'd stolen my career. He was wrong. He just handed me the weapon to end his. The scent of ozone from a hot iron, the whisper of silk charmeuse sliding over a cutting table, the frantic, rhythmic pulse of a sewing machine hitting its stride. This was the only language I'd ever truly known. It was the language of my father and his father before him. It was the language of Valmont, a name that once hung in the New York sky like a constellation, now a flickering candle in a hurricane, and I was trying to stop that flame from going out. Our atelier, tucked away in the heart of the garment district, was a glorious, organized chaos. Bolts of fabric stood like ancient scrolls in a library of color. Mannequins, my silent, headless confidants, wore the skeletons of dreams, muslin toiles pinned and tucked with 1,000 tiny corrections. This collection, the one we were preparing for New York Fashion Week, was everything. It wasn't just a collection, it was a resurrection. I'd named it Phoenix. A little on the nose, perhaps, but it was the only word for what we needed. Serena, the tension on machine 4 is pulling the chiffon. Again. Elena Petrova, my head seamstress, stood with her hands on her hips. Her Russian accent was as thick and comforting as the wool coats she crafted with architectural precision. She'd been my father's right hand, and now she was my rock. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a fierce maternal warmth. I walked over, my fingers tracing the delicate seam. "You're right, it's the needle. We need a microtex, not a universal." I swapped it out myself, my hands moving with an instinct born from years of practice. "Marco, how's the beading on the finale piece?" Marco Rixai, our head pattern cutter and my unofficial little brother, looked up from a gown that shimmered under the work lights like a captured galaxy. He was a prodigy, barely 25, with more passion in his little finger than most designers have in their whole careers. "Another 10 hours, maybe 12. Each star is a hand-sewn Swarovski. It's the most beautiful thing we've ever made, Julie." He was right. The finale gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue silk, so dark it was almost black, with a cascade of crystals that mapped out the constellations of the winter sky. It was hope, stitched into fabric. The heavy glass door to the atelier swung open, and the scent of expensive cologne and anxiety walked in. My cousin, Julian Valmont. "Serena, we need to talk." Julian was the CEO of Valmont. My father, a brilliant artist but a disastrous businessman, had appointed him before he passed, hoping Julian's MBA would be the yin to my creative yang. Instead, it felt like he was the storm trying to drown my little candle. "I'm busy, Julian. We have 37 looks to finish in 6 days." That's what I want to talk about. The numbers. The overtime budget is astronomical. The fabric costs for this Phoenix thing are triple what we projected. He picked up a sleeve dripping with hand-applied feathers and looked at it as if it were a dirty rag. "Is all this necessary?" Elena made a sound in the back of her throat like a cornered wolf. I shot her a look to stand down. "Yes, Julian, it's necessary," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "It's called couture. It's what this house was built on. You don't create a legacy by cutting corners. Legacies don't pay the bills, we are leveraged to the hilt. This show has to translate into sales, not just pretty pictures in Vogue. If it does..." He let the threat hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. His phone buzzed and he turned away, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "Yeah, no, not yet. Look, I told you I'd have it. Just give me until after the show. It's a sure thing, a sure thing." He hung up, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. I'd seen that look before, the desperate, hunted look of a man chasing his losses. His gambling problem was the family's ugliest, most open secret. "Just make sure you're ready, Serena, no mistakes." He straightened his tie and walked out, leaving a chill in his wake. That man would sell his own soul for $1, Elena muttered, returning to her machine. He already has, Lena, I whispered back. I'm just worried he's trying to sell ours, too. That little seed of suspicion, the one I'd been trying to ignore for months, began to sprout. The unexplained consulting fees, the frantic phone calls, his growing desperation as the show approached. I pushed it down. I had to focus. The phoenix had to fly. The next 6 days were a blur of caffeine, pinpricks, and beautiful exhaustion. We worked around the clock, fueled by bodega coffee and a shared belief that we were creating magic. The collection was finally finished. 37 looks, each a testament to survival and rebirth, hung in garment bags, tagged and ready. The room was quiet for the first time in weeks, a silent cathedral of our collective effort. Go home, everyone, I said, my voice hoarse. Get some sleep. The trucks come at 6 a.m. to take everything to the venue. Elena and Marco were the last to leave. Elena squeezed my shoulder. Your father would be so proud, Devachka. I stayed behind, wanting a final moment alone with my creations. I walked the line of garment bags, my hand brushing against each one. The feathered jacket, the liquid silver dress, the constellation gown. My heart swelled with a painful, fierce love. This was more than a job, it was my life. I finally locked up the atelier around 2 a.m., the city lights of New York a hazy promise outside the window. The call came at 5:47 a.m. It was Marco, his voice a frantic, broken sob. Julie, you have to come. You have to come now. I ran the 6 blocks, my lungs burning in the cold morning air. A police car was parked outside, its lights painting the street in silent, screaming strokes of red and blue. I pushed past the officer at the door and into the atelier, and my world ended. The room was a scene of violent violation. Garment bags were slashed and empty, their contents gone. Mannequins were toppled over like fallen soldiers. Scraps of silk and stray feathers littered the floor. The constellation gown's pedestal was empty. Everything, it was all gone. My knees gave out and I sank to the floor, a silent scream trapped in my throat. Years of work, months of sleepless nights, our one last hope, vanished into thin air. Julian arrived 20 minutes later, his face a mask of practiced shock. He surveyed the damage, shaking his head. The security system, there's no sign of a forced entry, a detective was saying. The alarm was disabled from the inside, code 2468. Who has that code? Just me, Julian said, his voice heavy with false gravity. And Serena, of course. He looked at me, a flicker of something cold and triumphant in his eyes. I stared back, the blood draining from my face as the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The desperation, the phone call. It's a sure thing. The inside job. The detective started asking me questions, but I couldn't hear him. The only sound was the roaring in my ears. Later that morning, as the press began to get wind of the story, Valmont collection stolen on eve of Nifwa, Julian called me into his office. This is a catastrophe, he said, not meeting my eyes. He was pacing in front of the large window overlooking Bryant Park. A complete failure of leadership. A failure of leadership? I repeated, my voice hollow. Julian, someone did this to us. Someone did this to the company, he corrected. And it happened on your watch. You were responsible for the security of that collection. The board is displeased. The investors are pulling out. We're ruined. So that's it, we just give up. He finally stopped pacing and looked at me. His expression was one I'd never seen before, a chilling mixture of pity and contempt. No, Serena, we don't give up. I have to do what's best for the brand's survival. I'm relieving you of your duties as creative director, effective immediately. We'll issue a statement about your inability to manage assets under pressure. The words hit me like physical blows. You're firing me? I'm saving the company, he said, his voice smooth as poison. Security will escort you out. Please leave your keys and company phone on the desk. I didn't move. I just stared at him, the man who shared my blood, the man who had just stolen my soul and was now throwing the empty shell out onto the street. The suspicion was no longer a sprout. It was a towering, venomous tree. He had done this. I didn't know how or why, but I knew it in my bones. As 2 security guards stood awkwardly by the door, I walked to the desk, placed my keys down, and turned to face him one last time. You won't get away with this, I said, my voice quiet but shaking with a rage so profound it scared me. Julian just smiled, a sad, dismissive little smile. Goodbye, Serena. Try not to be so emotional in your next venture. They walked me through the building my father had built. Past the sewing rooms, now silent. Past the cutting tables, now bare. When I stepped out onto the cold pavement of 7th Avenue, the city felt alien, hostile. I was an exile in my own home. I had nothing. My name, my work, my legacy, all of it gone. And in that moment, standing under the gray New York sky, I felt the last embers of the phoenix die, leaving nothing but cold, hard ash. Ash, that's all I was. I walked for hours, a ghost haunting the streets of my own city. The familiar landscape of Manhattan, the steam rising from manholes, the cacophony of sirens and taxi horns, the river of faces, felt like a foreign film playing without sound. I saw my reflection in a darkened store window and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were hollowed-out craters, her face a pale mask of shock. The Serena who lived for the drape of a bias-cut gown, who could tell the origin of a lace by touch alone, was gone. In her place was just this empty thing. I ended up on a bench in Central Park, watching children chase pigeons as the afternoon sun bled into a bruised purple twilight. I should have been at the venue, overseeing the lighting rig, giving last-minute notes to the models. Instead, I was here, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a betrayal so deep it felt like a physical part of me, a tumor growing on my heart. My phone, a cheap burner I'd bought for cash, had been silent all day. I had given the number to only 2 people. Just as the first lampposts flickered to life, they found me, Elena and Marco. They sat down on either side of me, not saying a word, creating a small, warm pocket of loyalty in the vast coldness of the city. Marco was the first to break the silence. He held out a paper bag. "I brought you a cronut." The line was an hour long. I told them it was for a fashion emergency. His attempt at a joke was so fragile it almost broke my heart all over again. I shook my head, unable to speak. Elena's voice was rough like gravel. "So, this is it? You sit in park and wait for what? For the pigeons to feel sorry for you? There's nothing left, Lena," I finally choked out, the words scraping my throat. "He took it all. He took my father's legacy and burned it to the ground." "Nonsense," she snapped, her fierce eyes locking onto mine. "He took fabric, he took thread. He did not take the fire is in here." She jabbed a finger at my chest, harder than she needed to. "The fire is in us. You think we let that weasel destroy what we built? What your father built?" "She's right, Julie," Marco chimed in, his voice gaining strength. "He can steal the clothes, but he can't steal the design. He can't steal your hands, he can't steal your brain." Tears I didn't know I had left began to slide down my cheeks. "But what does it matter? It's over. The show is tomorrow night. We have nothing." Elena stood up, pulling me to my feet with surprising strength. "This is not over. We go to my apartment. We drink strong tea, maybe something stronger. And then we work. Come." Her apartment in Queens was small and cramped, filled with the comforting smell of garlic and dill. It was a world away from the sleek, minimalist Valmont offices. It was real. She sat me down at her kitchen table while Marco made tea. The walls were covered in photos, Elena as a young woman in St. Petersburg, her parents, and a dozen pictures of me and Marco at various stages of our lives. We weren't just her employees, we were her family. After 2 cups of scalding tea, Elena looked at me, her expression unreadable. "All right, Serena, you were right to not trust him. I saw it too, the way he looked at the money, not the art." I looked up, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I am talking," she said, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across her face, "about the Echo collection." My breath caught in my chest. Marco's eyes widened. He knew, of course. He had to. For the past 4 months, as Julian's behavior grew more erratic and the company's finances more opaque, my suspicion had festered. I'd started seeing a pattern. Every time a major fabric invoice was due, Julian would create a crisis, a reason to delay payment, a way to move money around. I couldn't prove anything, but my instincts screamed that he was digging a hole and planning to pull the entire house down with him. So I made a contingency plan, a secret. The Phoenix collection was a performance. It was beautiful, expensive, and loud, a collection designed to be seen, to be noticed, to be a target. It was the magician's grand gesture, designed to draw the audience's eye. Meanwhile, with my own savings, I had been working on something else entirely. In secret, late at night after everyone had gone home, Marco and I had been building a second collection. We called it Echo. It was the quiet answer to Phoenix's scream. Where Phoenix used bold, saturated colors, Echo was a study in monochromatic tones, ivory, slate, charcoal, black. Where Phoenix was heavy with beading and feathers, Echo found its texture in complex pleating, radical draping, and the subtle interplay of matte and gloss. It was smarter, more personal, more me. It was the clothes I would make if I had no one to answer to. We sourced the fabrics from smaller, independent mills, paying in cash. We'd stored the finished pieces not at the atelier, but here, in 2 locked wardrobes in Elena's spare bedroom. You really thought he would do something like this?" Marco asked, his voice full of awe. "I hoped I was wrong," I admitted. I hoped it would just be the most expensive insurance policy I ever bought. I never wanted to have to use it. Elena walked to the bedroom and unlocked the wardrobes. She swung the doors open. Inside, 24 looks hung, pristine, and perfect. It was a smaller collection, but it was complete. It was a story. It was a weapon. For the first time since that horrifying 5 a.m. phone call, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was a tiny, dangerous spark of rage, and it felt like coming home. Okay, I said, my voice steady. We have a collection, but we have no venue, no models, no press, no anything. The show is in less than 36 hours. We have models, Marco said, pulling out his phone. Or at least we have friends. I can call in favors. They won't be supermodels, but they'll walk for you for free, Julie. They love you. And I have a warehouse, Elena added. My cousin, he owns a textile import business in the meatpacking district. It is empty at night, raw space. No runway, but it has atmosphere. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only thing we had. We started sketching out a plan, our voices low and urgent. We'd need lights, a sound system, makeup artists, hairstylists. The list was a mountain. As we worked, my burner phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Hello, is this Serena Valmont? The voice was female, with a low, cool timbre and an accent I couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe? It was a voice accustomed to being listened to. Who is this? I asked, wary. My name is Katerina Volkova. I nearly dropped the phone. Katerina Volkova, the face of a dozen major campaigns, the highest-paid runway model in the world for the last 3 years running. She was the star of our Rivals show, the one who would be walking in my stolen designs. What do you want? I asked, my voice tight. I believe I have something that belongs to you, she said calmly. Or rather, I know who does. I think we should meet. I saw your cousin, Julian. I saw him make the deal. The room fell silent. Elena and Marco stared at me, their eyes wide. Where? I breathed. A private poker game in a penthouse downtown 3 weeks ago. Men like your cousin and Anton Devereaux, she named the designer of the rival house. They think a model is just decoration. They think she doesn't listen. They are wrong. She continued, her voice precise and cutting. Devereaux was losing badly. Your cousin offered him a way out. A full collection, ready for the runway, in exchange for clearing a very large debt and a percentage of the sales. I heard every word. I saw the handshake. My mind was reeling. A witness, a credible, high-profile witness. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my heart pounding. Why help me? There was a pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its icy edge, replaced by something softer. Your father gave me my first major show when I was 16 and no one would hire me. He paid me fairly when other designers were paying models in clothes. He treated me like an artist, not a hanger. I owe him a debt, and, her voice hardened again, I do not like thieves, especially thieves with no taste. The spark of rage inside me roared into a flame. Where and when? I asked. I can't meet in person, not until after the show. Devereaux's people are watching me, but I can do something else. The show is tomorrow night at 8 p.m. at Spring Studios. The finale piece, your constellation gown, I am supposed to wear it. I know. The words were a knife twist. I will not wear it for him, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But I will wear it for you. What if you were to have your own show? At the same time, somewhere close by? Elena's cousin's warehouse. It was 3 blocks from Spring Studios, a guerrilla show, an ambush. It's impossible, I whispered, but even as I said it, my mind was racing, the pieces snapping into place. Is it? Katerina's voice was a challenge. You have the clothes, don't you? I have a feeling you are more prepared than they think you are. I looked at Elena. I looked at Marco. I looked at the 24 silent promises hanging in the wardrobe. The phoenix was ash. But maybe, just maybe, an echo could be louder than the original scream. Tell me your plan, Ms. Volkova, I said, a smile, sharp and predatory, touching my lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I'm listening. The next 36 hours were a symphony of controlled chaos. Elena's apartment became our war room. The scent of dill was replaced by the electric tang of adrenaline. We spread out the 24 looks of the Echo collection on every available surface. The ivory wool crepe coat, the slate gray satin slip dress that moved like poured mercury, the final black velvet gown with a single, brutal slash of silver embroidery down the spine. It was a collection born of doubt and secrecy, and it had a quiet strength the Phoenix collection, for all its bravado, had lacked. Okay, battle plan, I announced, standing over the kitchen table which was now covered in sketches and lists. Marco, you are head of talent. Call every model you know. Be honest. Tell them there's no pay, no glamour, just a chance to be part of something real. Tell them we're taking back what's ours. Marco's eyes lit up. He grabbed his phone and retreated to the balcony, his voice already a low, persuasive hum. Sophia, darling, it's Marco. Listen, I need the biggest favor of your life. Elena, I turned to my rock. The warehouse. We need to see it now. We need to figure out lighting, sound, a makeshift runway, everything. And we need your cousin to keep his mouth shut. Elena just nodded, pulling on her coat. He owes me. I got his son out of trouble with the law. He will be silent as a grave. While Elena went to secure the location, I took on the impossible task of press. I couldn't send out an official press release. That would tip off Julian and Devereaux. I needed to create a buzz, a rumor so tantalizing that the right people would drop everything to follow it. I thought of the one person in this industry who valued a scandalous story more than a front-row seat next to Anna Wintour, Beatrice Croft. Beatrice was the industry's most feared and respected blogger. Her site, The Guillotine, could make or break a career with a single scathing paragraph. She was acid-tongued, wickedly smart, and had a deep-seated hatred for the corporate commodification of fashion. She had been a vocal critic of Anton Devereaux's derivative designs and Julian's clumsy management of Valmont. She was my only shot. Finding her private email address was a challenge, but a few calls to old contacts yielded the prize. I crafted the email carefully, my fingers flying across the keyboard of my laptop. Subject: The Real Valmont Show. Beatrice, you don't know me, but you knew my father's work. You wrote that his last collection was an honest prayer in a room full of liars. My name is Serena Valmont. The story you've heard about my stolen collection is true. The story you haven't heard is what happens next. Tomorrow night, while Anton Devereaux parades my stolen dreams down his runway, I will be showing my soul 3 blocks away. No frills, no sponsors, just the clothes. A ghost collection, an echo of what was lost. Warehouse 17, Gansevoort Street, 8 p.m. sharp. Come see the prayer, or watch the liars win. I hit send, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a Hail Mary pass. If she ignored it, or worse, if she tipped off Devereaux, we were finished. Elena returned with keys and a grim smile. The warehouse is ours. It's a concrete box, but it is a big concrete box. Marco came back inside from the balcony, his face flushed with triumph. We have 12 models, not the big names, but they're hungry and they're angry on your behalf. Sophia is in, and she's bringing friends. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but we were still missing so much. I started a new list. Sound system, lighting, hair, makeup. It was a logistical nightmare. How are we going to pay for any of this? Marco asked, voicing the question that hung in the air. As if on cue, my burner phone rang. It was Katerina. How is the plan progressing? She asked, her voice a low murmur. It's progressing, I said. Slowly, we have models and a space. We have no money. I have taken care of that, she said simply. I have an account with a production company that owes me a favor, a very large favor. I have told them to supply whatever you need, lights, sound, a generator. They will send a truck to the warehouse tomorrow afternoon. The invoice will be sent to a shell corporation I own. Devereaux will never trace it back to me. I was stunned into silence. Katerina, why? This is a huge risk for you. I told you, I do not like thieves, she said, and I am bored. The industry has become so predictable. It needs a storm. Be the storm, Serena. She gave me the contact information for the production manager, a man named Silas. When I called him, he was all business. Got the list from Kat. You'll have everything you need by 4 p.m. tomorrow. My crew is discreet. Where are we sending it? I gave him the address, my hand shaking slightly. This was actually happening. The next day was a frantic race against the clock. We moved the Echo collection to the warehouse, a cavernous, cold space that smelled of dust and diesel, but it had high ceilings and raw, industrial bones. It was perfect. True to his word, Silas and his crew arrived at 4 p.m. They were a team of seasoned professionals who worked with the quiet efficiency of a special ops unit. Within 2 hours, they had set up a powerful sound system, rigged a series of stark, dramatic spotlights, and laid out a simple, painted runway on the concrete floor. Marco's model friends started to arrive, a small army of young, hopeful faces. They looked at the clothes with wide, reverent eyes. As I started to fit them, I could feel their energy, their belief in what we were doing. It was infectious. 2 makeup artists and a hairstylist Marco knew from a test shoot showed up with their kits, offering to work for free. We heard what Devereaux and your cousin did, one of them said, uncapping a lipstick. He's a pig. It's time someone took him down. The industry, for all its backstabbing, had a surprising capacity for solidarity when one of its own was truly wronged. At 7 p.m., an hour before the show, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. The sender, Beatrice Croft. The subject, Ray, the real Valmont show. My finger trembled as I opened it. The body of the email contained only 3 words, "I'll be there." I let out a shaky breath and showed the phone to Alina. She clapped me on the shoulder, a rare, wide smile on her face. "Now, we have a show." At 7:45, we were in position. The models were dressed, their makeup stark and minimalist, their hair pulled back in sleek, wet-look styles. The warehouse was dark except for the single spotlight on the entrance to our makeshift runway. The playlist I'd curated, a mix of haunting cello sonatas and aggressive industrial beats, was queued up. My small team, Alina, Marco, the volunteer artists, stood in the shadows, our hearts beating in time with the nervous energy crackling in the air. A handful of people had started to trickle in. Beatrice Croft arrived, dressed in her signature all-black, her expression unreadable. She gave me a single, sharp nod and took a spot against a concrete pillar. A few junior editors and stylists, tipped off by Beatrice, followed her in, their eyes wide with curiosity. It wasn't the crowd we would have had at Spring Studios, but it was the right crowd. They were the influencers, the tastemakers. At 7:59, I got a text from Katerina. "I'm in the finale gown. He's a nervous wreck." "The show is starting. Good luck, be the storm." I looked at Marco, who was manning the soundboard. I looked at Alina, who stood by the first model, ready to give her the cue. I took a deep breath. The Phoenix was dead, but its echo was about to shake the foundations of New York Fashion Week. "Okay," I said, my voice clear and steady in the darkness. "Let's begin." Marco hit play. The first mournful notes of a cello filled the warehouse. A single, harsh spotlight cut through the blackness, hitting the entrance of the runway. And our first model stepped into the light. The cello note hung in the air, a single, sustained thrum of defiance. Then the beat dropped, a hard, industrial pulse that vibrated up through the concrete floor. Our first model, Sophia, stepped into the runway's harsh, white glare. She wore the ivory coat, its lines clean and severe, its wide lapels framing her face like an archway. She walked with a slow, deliberate power, not the breezy, detached stride of a typical runway model, but the measured tread of a queen going to war. The small crowd was silent, their phones held up, small glowing rectangles capturing the moment. I saw Beatrice Croft lean forward slightly, her critical gaze missing nothing. In that stark, unforgiving light, the coat wasn't just a garment. It was a statement. It was armor. It was a blank page, ready for a new story. The next look was the slate gray satin slip dress. On the hanger, it was a simple column of fabric. On the model, it became a second skin, clinging and flowing with a liquid grace that seemed to defy gravity. It was vulnerability and strength in one breath. I watched Beatrice's pen start to move, a series of quick, decisive slashes across her notepad. Look after look, our small army marched. A sharply tailored charcoal suit with an impossibly nipped-in waist. A column gown of black crepe that exposed the entire back, held together by a fragile lattice of silk cords. An ivory sweater, hand-knitted by Alina in a complex cable pattern, paired with wide-legged slate trousers that pooled around the model's feet. Each piece was a quiet rebellion. We had no feathers, no sequins, no pyrotechnics. We had only the cut, the drape, the silhouette. We had the soul of the craft. Through the forest of raised phones, I caught glimpses of another world. A brighter, more garish world. On the tiny screens, I saw flashes from the show at Spring Studios. My show, my Phoenix collection. I saw my feathered jacket, the one Julian had held with such disdain, now walking under a blaze of spotlights. I saw my liquid silver dress, shimmering on a model I didn't know. A wave of nausea and rage washed over me. It was like watching a stranger read your diary aloud to a cheering crowd. They were clapping for my work, but they were giving the credit to a thief. Marco must have seen the look on my face. He leaned over from the soundboard and whispered, "Don't look at that, Julie. Look at this. Look at what you're doing right now." He was right. I forced my eyes away from the glowing screens and back to our runway. Beatrice wasn't looking at her phone. None of the serious editors were. They were watching our show, their attention undivided. They knew, even if they didn't have the whole story yet, they knew they were seeing something authentic, something born from pressure and fire. The final look of the Echo collection was the black velvet gown. It was the simplest piece, yet the most dramatic. Long-sleeved, high-necked, it encased the model like a column of pure night. As she turned, the slash of silver embroidery on her back caught the light like a lightning strike, a single, beautiful scar. She reached the end of the runway and stopped, holding the gaze of the audience for a long, silent moment. And then it was over. The music cut out, plunging the warehouse into silence and darkness, save for the spotlights now illuminating the empty runway. For a second, there was nothing. Then, a single person began to clap. It was Beatrice Croft. Slowly, the rest of the small room joined in, not the polite, scattered applause of a fashion show, but a genuine, appreciative ovation that echoed off the high ceilings. The lights came up. Marco rushed over and crushed me in a hug. Elena's eyes were shining with tears. We had done it. It might not have been enough, but we had done it. We had fought back. Just then, every phone in the room, which had been dutifully recording our show, started buzzing with notifications. The live stream from the Devereaux show was reaching its finale. A collective gasp went through our small audience as they all turned their attention to their screens. I crowded around one with Marco, my heart in my throat. The screen showed the opulent runway at Spring Studios. The final looks of my Phoenix collection, my vibrant, joyful, stolen work, were taking their final walk. The announcer's voice, slick and professional, boomed through the phone's tiny speaker. And now, for the grand finale of Anton Devereaux's magnificent collection, the supernova gown, worn by the one and only Katerina Volkova. The crowd on the screen roared with anticipation. The music swelled. The runway entrance stood empty for a beat too long. A nervous murmur went through the on-screen audience. I saw Devereaux and Julian standing in the wings, their faces tight with anxiety. Then she appeared. Katerina Volkova stepped into the light, but she wasn't wearing my constellation gown. She wasn't wearing my masterpiece. She was wearing a simple, unadorned black silk slip, the kind a model wears for a fitting. It was a blank canvas. She walked down the runway with a regal, almost contemptuous calm, her face a beautiful, impassive mask. The music faltered. The audience was utterly, completely silent. She reached the end of the runway, where the announcer stood with a microphone, his mouth hanging open in shock. With a fluid movement, she took the microphone from his hand. She turned to face the cameras, her ice blue eyes sweeping across the stunned crowd. "Good evening," she said, her voice, clear and amplified, filling the stunned silence not just in that room, but in ours as well. "What you have seen tonight is a beautiful collection. A collection of passion, of resilience, of rebirth." A small, cold smile touched her lips. I should know, because none of it was designed by Anton Devereaux. A tidal wave of gasps and frantic whispers erupted. These designs, including the gown I was supposed to be wearing tonight, are the stolen work of a brilliant young designer. A designer who was betrayed, fired, and left with nothing, so that two greedy men could pay their debts. She looked directly into the main camera, as if she were looking right at me. Her name is Serena Valmont. And if you want to see what true genius looks like under pressure, I suggest you check your social media feeds right now, because the real show just happened 3 blocks from here. She let the microphone drop from her hand. It hit the runway with a loud, percussive bang that echoed like a gunshot. Then she turned and walked away, leaving behind a scene of absolute pandemonium. In our warehouse, the silence was broken by a wild, exultant cheer. Marco was screaming. Elena was openly weeping with joy. Beatrice Croft looked up from her phone, her face alight with the thrill of the kill. She gave me a sharp, approving grin. "Now that," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "is fashion." My burner phone buzzed. It was a text from Katerina. It was an audio file and a short message. "Here is the recording of their deal. Burn them to the ground." I stood there, surrounded by the beautiful, quiet strength of the Echo collection, the cheers of my friends ringing in my ears, and the proof of my vindication glowing in my hand. The storm had broken, and I was holding the lightning. The world outside the warehouse walls had exploded. The world inside was a pocket of stunned, jubilant disbelief. For a moment, we were all frozen, watching the pandemonium unfold on a dozen tiny screens. We saw Anton Devereaux's face, pale and slack-jawed, before the livestream camera was mercifully cut. We saw security guards rushing the stage as reporters swarmed, shouting questions. It was a beautiful, glorious train wreck. Then the spell broke. Marco let out a whoop that echoed through the vast space and lifted me off my feet in a spinning hug. "You did it! Oh my God, Julie, you actually did it!" Elena was laughing, a deep, full-throated sound of pure joy I hadn't heard in years. The models were cheering, hugging each other, their professional composure forgot. They hadn't just walked in a show, they had been soldiers in a revolution. My phone, the one Beatrice had emailed, began to vibrate against my hand with such intensity it felt like it might shatter. A torrent of notifications flooded the screen. My name was trending on Twitter. Valmont Echo, Katerina's bomb, Fashion Week coup. The first grainy photos and videos from our guerrilla show were already going viral, posted by the editors in the room. They were being retweeted by the second, accompanied by captions of fire emojis and breathless praise. Beatrice Croft pushed herself off the concrete pillar she'd been leaning against and walked towards me, her expression as serious as a surgeon's. "Congratulations, Valmont," she said, her voice cutting through the celebratory noise. "You have their attention. Now you have to tell them what to do with it." "What do you mean?" I asked, my head still spinning. "I mean this moment is volatile. It will last for 12 hours, maybe 24. Right now you are David who just slew Goliath, but the industry has a short memory. Devereaux and your cousin are already in damage control. They will spin this. They will call you a disgruntled employee, a liar. They will try to bury you in lawsuits." She tapped the audio file icon on my phone screen. "This is your weapon. Do not use it yet." "It's the proof," I stammered. "Exactly. Let them lie first. Let them dig their own graves. Tomorrow morning, they will release a statement full of denials and accusations. Let the world hear their story. And then," a thin, cruel smile played on her lips, "you release the recording. You don't just wound them, you execute them publicly." Her cold, calculated strategy sent a shiver down my spine, but I knew she was right. This wasn't just about vindication anymore. This was about power. "What do I do now?" I asked her. "You disappear," she said. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer any numbers you do know. Go somewhere safe with your team. I will handle the initial narrative. I'm posting my review of your Echo collection in 1 hour. I will frame the story. Your only job is to stay silent and prepare for your next move, and get a very, very good lawyer." With another sharp nod, she turned and strode out of the warehouse, a shark returning to bloody waters. Her advice was still ringing in my ears when my burner phone, the one only 2 people had the number for, began to ring. The caller ID was blocked. I hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Serena." The voice was unrecognizable. It was Julian, but stripped of all his smooth, corporate polish. It was the raw, snarling sound of a cornered animal. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed. "You think you're clever, you little bitch? You've destroyed everything. The brand, the family name." "I didn't destroy it, Julian," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You did. You sold it to pay a gambling debt." There was a choked sound on the other end. "You have no proof. It's your word against mine, against Devereaux's. Who do you think they'll believe?" "I think we're about to find out," I said softly. "I will bury you, Serena," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I will sue you for slander, for breach of contract. You will never work in this city again. I will take the house. I will take everything your father left. You'll have nothing." "You already tried to leave me with nothing, Julian," I said, and the cold fury in my own voice surprised me. "The difference is, now I'm not afraid of it. Goodbye." I ended the call, my hand steady. The fear was gone, burned away by the fire of the last 24 hours. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. Elena put a protective hand on my shoulder. "We go back to my place. No one will find you there. We make a real plan." Back in the safety of Elena's apartment, with the door bolted and the curtains drawn, the 4 of us, me, Elena, Marco, and now Katerina, who had slipped out of the chaos at Spring Studios and arrived in a taxi wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, held a council of war. Katerina had a laptop open, monitoring the fallout online. "Beatrice's review is up," she announced, reading from the screen. While Antoine Devereaux was busy hosting a séance with stolen ghosts, Serena Valmont was conducting a masterclass in resurrection 3 blocks away. The Echo collection is not just a triumph of design, it's a brutal, beautiful testament to the power of a singular vision. It is the most important collection of the season. Marco let out a low whistle. "She didn't just review it, she canonized it." "This is good," I said, pacing the small living room. "This builds the narrative, but Julian's threat. He's right about one thing, he controls the company. He can tie me up in litigation for years. I need a lawyer." "I may know someone," Katerina said, looking up from her screen. "Her name is Evelyn Reed. She handles the contracts for my bigger campaigns. She specializes in intellectual property and corporate warfare. They call her the shark in the Chanel suit. She eats men like your cousin for breakfast." I took the number. While I was looking for a pen, Elena cleared her throat. "There is also the matter of money," she said quietly. "To fight a war, you need an army. To have an army, you need gold." She was right. Legal fees, setting up a new base of operations, my savings had been wiped out creating the Echo collection. I was broke. "My father had an old friend," I said, thinking aloud. "Arthur Vance. He was an early investor in Valmont, the first one who believed in Dad's vision. Julian pushed him out of the board a few years ago, said he was too old-fashioned. I found his number in my father's old address book, a worn leather volume I kept like a holy text. I dialed, not knowing if he would even remember me. He answered on the second ring. "Arthur Vance speaking." "Mr. Vance, it's Serena Valmont, James Valmont's daughter." There was a warm chuckle on the other end. "Serena, my dear girl, I was wondering when you might call." I've been watching the fireworks tonight with a very good bottle of scotch. Your father would have been immensely proud. And he would have told you I told you so about your cousin. Tears welled in my eyes. He would have. Your father always said Julian had the ethics of an alley cat but the charm of a diplomat, a dangerous combination. I assume you're not calling for a friendly chat. What do you need? I took a deep breath. I'm going to take back my company, Mr. Vance, but I need help, I need backing. Julian still controls a majority of the shares, doesn't he? He does. But I believe he acquired them through questionable means, and I have evidence that he has deliberately acted against the company's best interests, evidence that could invalidate his position. I thought of the audio file, a time bomb waiting to explode. There was a thoughtful silence on the line. Serena, your father was my best friend. Watching what Julian has done to his legacy has been one of the great sadnesses of my later years. If you have a plan and a good lawyer, you have my full support. My resources are at your disposal. Consider the Vance family back on board with Valmont. I hung up the phone, a wave of profound relief washing over me. We had a strategist in Beatrice, a secret weapon in Katerina, a legal shark in Evelyn Reed, and a war chest from Arthur Vance. We had an army. I looked at my team. At Alina's steadfast loyalty, at Marco's boundless energy, at Katerina's cool, strategic mind. We were a strange, makeshift family, forged in a crucible of betrayal. The battle for the runway was over. The war for Valmont had just begun. The morning light filtering through the blinds of Alina's apartment felt different. Yesterday it had been the gray light of defeat. Today it was the sharp, clarifying light of the morning after a battle. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a strange hum of nervous energy in its place. The world was talking about us. Marco was glued to his laptop, reading headlines aloud like a town crier. The echo heard round the world how Serena Valmont hijacked Fashion Week. That's from Vogue. The New York Times is calling it a breathtaking act of creative defiance. Oh, this is my favorite from some random blog. Devereaux got publicly pantsed by a ghost and it was glorious. Elena, ever the pragmatist, placed a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me. Eat. A general cannot plan a war on an empty stomach. I managed a few bites, but my mind was already miles away, charting the treacherous terrain ahead. We had won the public's heart. Now we had to win the company. That meant facing a legal system designed to protect men like Julian. My first call was to the number Katerina had given me. A crisp, no-nonsense voice answered on the first ring. Evelyn Reed. Ms. Reed, my name is Serena Valmont. Katerina Volkova suggested I call you. I've been expecting you, she said, her voice devoid of surprise. My office, 1 hour. The offices of Reed and Associates were on the 50th floor of a glass tower overlooking the city. The decor was brutally minimalist, white marble, black leather, chrome. It was a space designed to intimidate, to communicate that here, sentiment was a liability. Evelyn Reed herself was the room personified. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a razor-sharp Chanel suit, with dark hair pulled back into a severe chignon. She didn't smile, she assessed. Tell me everything, she said, gesturing to a chair. Leave nothing out. For the next 30 minutes I laid it all bare. Julian's gambling, the cooked books I'd suspected but couldn't prove, the creation of the Echo collection, the theft, Katerina's story, the gorilla show. She listened without interruption, her fingers steepled, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, I took out my phone. And then there's this, I said. Katerina recorded the conversation where Julian made the deal with Devereaux. I played the audio file. The sound was surprisingly clear. Julian's desperate, wheedling voice, Devereaux's smug arrogance, the clinking of ice in their whiskey glasses. They discussed the price, the logistics of the theft, and how they would frame me as incompetent. It was a complete confession, wrapped in a bow of their own hubris. When it finished, a long silence filled the room. Evelyn Reed's face remained impassive for a moment, and then, for the first time, her expression changed. A slow, chillingly satisfied smile spread across her lips. Ms. Valmont, she said, her voice a purr. This isn't a lawsuit, this is a coronation. She stood and walked to the vast window behind her desk. Your cousin and Devereaux are about to make their fatal mistake. They're scheduled to hold a joint press conference in, she glanced at a sleek watch on her wrist, 45 minutes. They will lie. They will deny everything. They will paint you as a hysterical, vengeful amateur. Beatrice Croft said the same thing, I murmured. Beatrice is a fine journalist but a poor lawyer. She sees a story. I see a kill shot, Evelyn replied. Let them speak. Let them commit professional suicide on live television. While they're talking, my team will be filing an emergency injunction with the courts to freeze all of Valmont's assets, citing executive malfeasance. We will also be filing a suit against Devereaux for theft of intellectual property and tortious interference. The recording will be our Exhibit A. She turned back to me, her eyes glinting. By lunchtime, Julian's authority as CEO will be nothing more than a title on a piece of paper he can no longer access. As if on cue, her assistant buzzed. Ms. Reed, the press conference is starting. A large screen descended from the ceiling, and the image of a podium, swarmed by reporters, filled the room. Julian and Anton Devereaux walked out, their faces grim and composed. Julian stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning," he began, his voice oozing a false sincerity. "I am here today to address the outrageous and defamatory spectacle that occurred last night. My cousin, Serena Valmont, a talented but deeply troubled designer, orchestrated a malicious stunt to sabotage the launch of a vital partnership between Valmont and the House of Devereaux." I felt a hot surge of anger, but Evelyn held up a calming hand. "Let him talk," she whispered. Julian continued, weaving a tale of my supposed instability after our father's death, my creative block, my desperate attempt to stay relevant. Devereaux took the podium next, claiming he had stepped in to help a legacy brand in crisis, and that my designs were a delusional fantasy. They denied everything. They lied with the practiced ease of men who had been doing it their entire lives. When it was over, Evelyn switched off the screen. "Perfect," she said, her smile returning. "They've just handed us the rope. Now let's talk about your backer. To fund a war of this scale, you'll need significant capital." "I have someone," I said, my confidence growing. "Arthur Vance." Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. "Arthur Vance, the man who built half of the city's skyline? I didn't know he was still involved in fashion." "He was my father's best friend," I said, "and he despises my cousin." My meeting with Arthur Vance took place at the Century Club, a bastion of old New York power. He was exactly as I remembered him, tall, with a mane of white hair and eyes that twinkled with a shrewd intelligence. He embraced me warmly. "I watched that press conference," he said, leading me to a quiet table. "Julian has his mother's looks and his father's lack of character, a fatal combination." He ordered us tea and then fixed me with a serious gaze. "I told you my resources are yours. But I need to know your plan. Not just for winning, Serena, but for afterward. What kind of Valmont do you intend to build when you take it back?" The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on the fight, I hadn't let myself dream of what came next. I want to build a house that my father would be proud of," I began, finding my words. "One that values craftsmanship over profit margins. One that nurtures young talent like Marco. A place where the people who stitch the gowns are as respected as the people who design them. I want to make it smaller, smarter, more sustainable. I want to bring back the soul." Arthur listened patiently. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "That sounds like a company your father would have loved, and it sounds like a company I would be proud to invest in." He slid a folder across the table. "My lawyers have set up a line of credit for you. It should be more than enough to handle Evelyn Reed's fees and keep your team afloat. The only condition is this: when you are CEO, I want a permanent seat on the board. Not to run things, but to make sure a man like your cousin never gets his hands on the wheel again." "Done," I said without hesitation. I walked out of the Century Club and into the bright afternoon sunlight, feeling for the first time like I was on solid ground. I had the legal strategy. I had the financial backing. I had the truth. That evening, we gathered again in a new location, a suite at the Carlyle Hotel secured by Arthur. It was our official headquarters. The whole team was there, me, Alina, Marco, Katerina, with Evelyn Reed and Arthur Vance patched in on a secure video call. "All right," Evelyn's voice was crisp from the speaker. "The injunction has been filed. The lawsuits are ready. Julian and Devereaux have no idea what's about to hit them. Beatrice Croft has agreed to an exclusive. She will be the one to break the audio recording to the world. Serena, the only thing left is your command. Once we release this, there is no going back." I looked around the room. At Alina, my steadfast second mother. At Marco, whose belief in me had never wavered. At Katerina, the unlikely angel of vengeance who had risked her own career for a debt of honor. At the faces on the screen, the shark and the titan who had become my champions. This was my army. This was my family. The phoenix was born of fire and spectacle. The echo was born of silence and strength. What came next would be the synthesis of both. It would be the judgment. I took a deep breath, looked into the camera, and gave the order. "Leak it. Burn them to the ground." The moment I gave the order, the world shifted on its axis. Evelyn Reed simply said, "Done," and ended the video call. The ensuing silence in the hotel suite was deafening, the kind of quiet that comes before a tidal wave. We all just looked at each other, the five of us, suspended in the final seconds of our old lives. Marco was the one who broke the spell. He refreshed Beatrice Croft's website, The Guillotine, on his laptop. And there it was. The headline was brutal and simple. The whispers become a scream. Audio CONFIRMS VALMONT and DEVRUX CONSPIRED to Steele Collection Frame Designer. Beneath the headline was the embedded audio file and Beatrice's scathing, meticulous dissection of the entire affair. She didn't just report the news, she prosecuted a case. She cross-referenced the recording with the timeline of events, with Julian's known financial troubles, with Devereux's history of derivative designs. It was a journalistic masterpiece of annihilation. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. It was the lead item on every news site, every fashion blog, every entertainment channel. The audio clip played on a loop on cable news. Social media erupted in a firestorm of righteous fury. Valmont tapes became the #1 trend worldwide. The public, who had been on my side emotionally, now had the irrefutable proof. They turned on Julian and Devereux with a ferocity that was terrifying and beautiful to watch. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. By the next morning, the board of Devereux's parent company had called an emergency meeting and suspended him indefinitely. Major department stores announced they were pulling his collections. His celebrity endorsements vanished overnight. For Julian, it was even worse. Evelyn's injunction had been granted. The company accounts were frozen. His corporate credit cards were declined. He was a king trapped in a castle with no treasury. Arthur Vance, exercising his rights as a minority shareholder with cause, formally called for an extraordinary meeting of the board to vote on the removal of Julian Valmont as CEO. It was a formality. The war was already over. This was just the signing of the surrender. A week later, I walked back into the Valmont building. It was the first time I had been there since Julian had me escorted out. This time, I wasn't the one being watched by security. They were there to oversee the removal of Julian's personal effects. I walked past my cousin in the hallway. He looked like a stranger, shrunken, haggard, his expensive suit hanging on him like a shroud. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor as he walked out of our family's legacy for the last time. There was no triumph in that moment, only a profound, hollow sadness for what he had broken, not just in the company, but in our family. My first act as the newly appointed CEO of Valmont was to call a company-wide meeting in the main atelier, the same room that had been the scene of the crime. Elena and Marco stood beside me. I looked out at the faces of the cutters, the seamstresses, the pattern makers, the true heart of the house. Many of them had tears in their eyes. "Welcome back," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I know the last few weeks have been uncertain. You've heard the stories, the rumors. Today the truth comes home. Valmont is not just a label on a dress. It's not a stock price. It's us. It's the hands that make the clothes. It's the passion in this room. And I promise you, from this day forward, we will be a house that honors its heart." We started small. I used the capital from Arthur Vance not for a splashy new campaign, but to give every employee a long overdue raise and to invest in upgrading their equipment. We rehired the people Julian had let go. We canceled the mass-market diffusion lines he'd signed and refocused on the couture and ready-to-wear that had made our name. Our first official show under the new leadership was 6 months later. We didn't show at Fashion Week. Instead, we converted the atelier itself into the venue. We invited not just the press and buyers, but the families of our employees. The models were the same ones who had walked for me in the warehouse, and the final look was worn by Katerina Volkova, who walked for free as a gesture of friendship. The collection was a fusion of the Phoenix and the Echo. It had the bold, defiant spirit of the stolen collection, but tempered with the quiet, structural wisdom of the secret one. It was a collection about healing, about finding strength not in spite of scars, but because of them. As I took my bow on the runway, holding hands with Elena and Marco, the applause was overwhelming. But the most important moment came afterward. My father's oldest friend, Arthur Vance, came up to me, his eyes shining. "This," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is the house your father dreamed of building." In the years that followed, Valmont became more than a brand. It became a symbol. We became a certified B Corp, focusing on sustainable practices and ethical treatment of workers. I established the Valmont Foundation, which provided scholarships to young designers from underprivileged backgrounds, ensuring the future of the craft would be more inclusive than its past. I learned that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes, it's the violent, shattering event that forces you to rebuild yourself into something stronger, truer. The fire that was meant to destroy me only served to forge me. It burned away the doubts, the insecurities, the need for approval. It left behind the core of who I was, a designer, a leader, a fighter. They tried to steal my work, my name, my legacy, but they forgot the most important thing. A design can be copied. A collection can be stolen, but the fire inside, the creative spark that turns a simple bolt of fabric into a dream, that is something that can never be taken. It can only be shared. And in sharing it, we found our greatest victory, proving that in fashion, as in life, the most beautiful designs are the ones that rise from the ashes, stronger and more brilliant than before.